Chances are you probably clicked on this episode because you are in a time of singleness yourself, or you just wanted to hear the mistakes that I made while being single. But whatever season you are in, I feel like this is a really important topic to talk about, especially in our world today. I feel like since a very young age, I've always been enamored by being in a relationship. And we see it a lot on social media, on TV, everywhere, basically. And what isn't talked about is what do you do when you're single? Because I feel like a lot of us can just be dreaming for a relationship, dreaming for the perfect thing, and none of us really know what to do when we don't have that. So, today I wanted to talk about that. Now, this is advice that I've gathered from my own experiences, from other people's experiences, from books, from sermons, from the Bible, from God revealing to me some areas that I probably could have done better in. Now, I'm still young, obviously. I still have a lot to learn, but I feel like I'm now coming to the point where I've been in relationships, been through breakups, went through singleness, and I've been able to look back and realize, wow, probably shouldn't have done that there. Now, do I regret it? No, not really, because it turned me into the person I am today and it gave me experience in that area. And now I'm able to sit down and talk about the mistakes I've made. So I don't regret it. But if you're listening to this and you hear these mistakes that I've made, I would hope that you would maybe think about them and try not to make them in your life. And if you already have, that is fine because we can relate in that. We can resonate in that. You can resonate with me in that area. But regardless, I hope that either way, this can provide some encouragement to you. Now, these are things that I wish someone would have told me. Although these are things that probably someone did tell me, but I just didn't listen because sometimes you aren't ready to hear the advice that other people have to give. You kind of have to go through it for yourself, and that's totally fine too. I wanted to talk about 3 mistakes I've made and then what to do instead. Just not just what not to do, but like what to do instead. So, number 1, this is probably the most important. And I made the mistake of thinking a guy could make me happy. Like, I used to think, I'm not happy right now because I'm not in a relationship, but once I get in a relationship, I'll be happy. And now, this is to be expected when you grow up on movies where it's like, oh, she meets the guy of her dreams and now she's happy. She was like really upset before, and now she's happy. And it's like, that's bound to happen, especially like when you're that young and your brain is so like imprinted. But yeah, that's what I thought, and I think that's what many of us think. A guy will make us happy, and I'm specifically talking to the girls right now, if you didn't already gather that, but I thought a guy could fill a hole in my heart that really only God could fill, and so in our culture today, it's very common to put relationships on a pedestal, specifically the guy on a pedestal, like make him the idol. You want to seek your validation from him. You want to tell him that you want him to tell you all the nice things, compliment you, you put your self worth in him. And so when you are single, what do? We aren't happy being single because we just think that being in a relationship will make us happy. So when we get into a relationship down the line, you're either going to make the other person an idol because you thought that they would be your happiness, or you're going to be blinded by some of the red flags in their life because you're just going to say, oh, a relationship is supposed to make me happy, a relationship is supposed to make me happy, that you're just going to be blinded. Or we get into a relationship that may be what a relationship should be, but because you thought that it's supposed to be all sunshines, rainbows, happiness, you're like, this is wrong. I got to get out. And really, you just needed to stay and work through things and do life like a normal human being. But because you thought a relationship was supposed to make you happy, you ditched. In my singleness, I kept wishing and hoping that I could be with someone because I thought that would make me happy. And then down the line, when I did find God, I did start building a relationship with Him by reading the Bible, by praying, by surrounding myself with people who also had a relationship with God. When I started doing that, even though I was doing that, I still held in the back of my mind, these images of, "Oh, when I meet this guy, I'm gonna be, like, super happy," like, "Oh, wait, where's that guy over there? Maybe, like, I should be in a relationship with him." Like, I was always searching for my happiness, and what I didn't realize was I have this joy inside, I have this joy from God, but the reason I wasn't fully experiencing it is because even though I wasn't in a relationship, I was still making guys before God. And let's not do that. Let's not make guys before God because it never ends well. Never. Trust me, it doesn't. And so I'm going to go into this more later, but instead of hoping and dreaming for the guy to make you happy, and these are quotation marks I'm using if you're listening here. And if you are listening, go watch on YouTube because you can see my facial expressions and my hand movements because apparently I do a lot of those when I speak. But anyway, so instead of trying to seek your happiness in someone else, doesn't just go for guys, this goes for anything else. Find peace in the moment, find peace within, find peace from building a relationship with God. And maybe you're saying, well, I go to church, once a week, I believe in God, but that's not the same thing. It's not the same thing as having a personal relationship with Him where you're constantly praying throughout the day. You're constantly just talking to Him and you're reading your Bible in the morning or at night and you're, daily communicating with Him. So, anyway, we'll go into that more later. But number two, this is a big mistake I made. I thought that I could just be friends with guys. Like, I thought I was one of the guys, but I was not one of the guys. I just simply wasn't. And I tried to convince myself that I was. I remember seeing this TikTok about a year and a half ago, and it said something like this. It said, if you have friends of the opposite gender now, would anything have to change if you were to get into a relationship? For instance, maybe the way I hugged a guy that I said was my friend, would that have to change the moment I got in a relationship? Or, the way that I spent time with that guy or was in very close proximity to him, would that have to change when I got in a relationship? And maybe the way we text, would that have to change when I got in a relationship? If any of those things have to change, you are in a situationship. One of you has feelings for the other, if not both. And the issue with this is it creates a lot of drama. Maybe you're wondering, does this guy like me? Does he, you don't know, and you're just kind of going along, falling into maybe not the best situations. Now, my opinion is simply that usually, we cannot be friends with guys in the same way that you can be friends with girls. Like, it just doesn't work like that. And I know, like, I always thought, like, oh, it'd be so great to have, like, a guy best friend, but it simply does not work. One of you is bound to have feelings for the other. And that might be great because maybe, if you have a guy best friend, date him. Like, I'm not saying, like, go date your guy best friend if you have one, but if you have a best friend that is a guy, like, that is someone that you would wanna be with. Like, I don't know about you, but if I had a guy that was best friend, like, I would marry him, Just don't take that literally, but you know what I'm saying here? So, maybe you meet this guy in a group and you're like, "Wow, he seems like a really great guy." So you get to know him around other people. Maybe you do hang out on one-on-one, but you have, like, boundaries and you're not gonna, like, slip over the line. And I'm not trying to be like super like, oh, you have to have these rules in place. But what I am trying to address is that if you meet a guy, say you meet him and you start hanging out together one on one a lot, you start texting all the time, hugging for maybe way too long, and then you start having these emotions. And these emotions of this new thing, because a lot of times it's just the newness of meeting this guy that we are excited about. Maybe that's gonna block the reality, and the reality is he's never gonna actually be someone who would be good for you in a relationship. You see what I mean? But the issue is what you did was you didn't have those clear, like, boundaries, so then you kind of slid into a relationship without even knowing it. Before you know it, you're texting all the time, you're calling each other, and then before you know it, you don't know if you're dating, but you both like each other, but you don't know what you're doing, and then there's just a lot of conflict with that, and then maybe you realize you don't even wanna be with this person, but you just slid into this kind of relationship thing. You didn't, carefully take your time and step up the stairs. You slid into it. And I'm speaking from experience here, so I'm not calling anyone out. I'm calling myself out. And so, like I said, I think there is a way to be friends, but you cannot be friends in the same way with guys that you can be friends with girls. So maybe if you were to be friends with a guy, which I was, and then it turned into a relationship, which was amazing, but it only works that way because he didn't, like, cross that line. Like, I think that a guy should be so respectful in the way that, you guys are friends, that you don't even know he likes you because he's not making it overly obvious until he actually tells you. Like, I think that's very honorable, very respectable if they are doing that. And maybe you hear me talking about boundaries and you're like, "Well, I'm not, like, crossing physical boundaries," like, if that's what you mean. But there's also emotional boundaries, and this is something that I didn't realize, because 'cause I've been friends with guys where I didn't wanna be with them, but I liked sharing about my life. Like, I am an open book. You can ask me anything, and chances are, like, I'll answer. But there comes an issue with that when I met a guy for, like, the first time. I'm like, "Oh, he's a great friend," and I would share my whole life story. I would share, like, my deepest secrets, and then we would bond in that way, and then that bond would either make them like me or make me like them, but it was this foggy lens I was seeing things through. And so I talked about this in the episode about guarding your heart. Guarding your heart, meaning that you don't tell someone your entire life and what you're struggling with and, your deepest, darkest moments the first few times of spending time with them. And I've done this with girls too. Where, we hang out and I tell them everything. And then we, like, never talk again. And it's like, wow, well, that was kind of, that was not good. You know what I mean? And then what you're doing is you're bonding with this person, not physically, but emotionally, which is in some ways even harder to come back from. So I would really suggest that if you are getting to know a guy, if you are maybe starting to go on dates even, to make sure you're guarding your heart and not sharing your entire life in one sitting. Not because they don't want to hear it, not because they don't care. Maybe they do really care, but because you're guarding your heart. And also, if they do have bad intentions, that's also a good thing that you're guarding your heart. And so, what's my overall conclusion here? 9 times out of 10 in my life and in other people's lives that I've seen, one will develop feelings for the other. And while that might lead into a beautiful relationship, if you don't handle it correctly, you can easily slide into a relationship you don't want to be in. So, overall, this really comes with using discernment. When you are single and you want to meet people, maybe you're like, well, how am I supposed to meet people? Just be wise about it. Be wise about that guy that you are spending time with. Maybe do that in group settings. Maybe do a Bible study together, or, like, do something that's a little bit more structured instead of just hanging out at, like, 10 o'clock at night. But anyway, moving on to the third thing here, which is I wasted time on focusing on what guy I could be with instead of where God wanted to lead me in my life in the current time. So, what if instead of focusing on being in a relationship, we focused on, well, anything but that, We focused on growing and developing ourselves and letting God lead us. And this is something that I touched on in the first one. We think that a relationship will make us happy. So, that's all we're thinking about. This third mistake, though, this is where I wanted to go more into, because I think that a lot of times we focus on growing and developing ourselves because we want to find someone that will like us, and we want to better ourselves for another person, for that guy that we see at the gym or that guy that we, saw at the store once. We want to like be better for them. And I think that's an issue because when you are single, sometimes your attention, all it's going to be on is, oh, that guy, him over there. When what we want to focus on is where is God leading us in this moment. So there are a few different areas that you can focus on while you are single. So, number one, your spiritual health. When you get into a relationship, you are just bound to not have the same time that you did when you're single. So maybe you're not going to have time when you're getting in a relationship to read the Bible for like 2 hours a day. I'm not saying you get in a relationship and you completely throw God aside. You can do that thing together, but when you are single, you are going to have more time for your spiritual health. So, what is something you can do? Maybe you can start going to church if you haven't yet. Maybe you can start reading your Bible. Maybe you haven't touched the Bible in a while and you're like, I want to see what this thing is about. So, you start reading the Gospels, which are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in the New Testament, and you start learning about Jesus' life. You start learning about who he is. You start applying that to your life. And you work on your spiritual health while you're single. And then another thing is your physical health. How are you physically right now? Are you eating the foods that are making your body nourished and fueled? Are you exercising? Are you making that a habit? Because when you do get into a relationship, I think it's really a good idea to have these healthy habits set in place before getting in a relationship. Because, like I said, being in a relationship is going to take up a lot of your time, which is beautiful because you have someone to share life with. But it can be harder to start new habits if you are blinded by like this infatuation of love. And so I think it's really good to focus on, getting your exercise in, going on walks daily, maybe stretching, maybe making a routine of that. So think about what's one thing you can do today to enhance your physical health. And then another thing is sleep. Prioritizing your sleep, getting on a consistent sleep schedule, which I always find myself getting in and out of, and it can be very difficult at times. And then another thing is mental health. Where is your mental health right now? I think sometimes we want to be in a relationship so bad that we're neglecting our mental health while we're single, and we forget that how are we going to be like, if we're being honest with ourselves, are we ready to be in a relationship? Maybe you are. Maybe you totally are. But maybe we aren't. And maybe your mental health needs some work. So maybe that means talking with a counselor. Maybe that means reading some books on the mind. Maybe that means journaling or building a relationship with God, because that is one thing that has helped my mental health tremendously. In times of anxious thoughts, anxiety, just remembering Jesus said, "Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself." Just remembering that I don't need to worry about the future because God has that in control. And so that has been really great for my mental health. And then, your social health. What about your friends? Like, maybe you can go on trips with your friends and you can, start a Bible study with your friends. Like, how is that? Because when you do get in a relationship, it is, you do see some friendships in your life that you may have to spend less time with. Um, Maybe they aren't as important to you at that time. And I'm not saying to ditch your friends when you get in a relationship, definitely not. But what I am saying is when you are single, that is the time to build strong friends with girls and really just get excited about that. And I think that's something that I would neglect too, because like I said, I was wanting to be friends with guys. So I would go a few weeks without seeing my friends, my true like best friends, because I would be hanging out with this guy on the weekend and then hanging out with that guy on the weekend. And it was like kind of that thrill of just meeting someone new. And maybe just, does he like me? Does he not? But that thrill was not worth it because it left with just drama and unnecessary drama. And then also financial health. What about your finances? Are you even ready to be in a relationship? Because maybe you're thinking, well, I'll just get a guy to pay for everything. I don't need to like save my money. Well, like, yeah, that's nice. Yes, guys providing for us, but you don't want to be irresponsible with your money. So if you're in debt, if you struggle to save, if you are a constant overspender, maybe start working on those habits so when you do get in a relationship, you aren't going to waste all this money and get both of each other into debt. You know what I mean? So that's just another thing. So we have our physical health, spiritual health, mental health, social health, financial health. Um, yeah. And with mental health, we could also include things like learning, maybe taking up new courses. There's a lot of free resources out there. I mean, we have the world basically at our fingertips, which can be a very bad thing, but it can also be good because there's so many free online courses. I mean, if you want to learn about how to do photography or how to edit videos or, more about the Bible, you can just look that up and spend your free time learning. So anyway, those are just some areas that I think focusing on when you're single, of course, also while you're in a relationship, but when you're single especially. And then one thing I wanted to leave you with is maybe you think you're doing all of these things already and you're like, "Well, Adriana, I'm doing all of this already and I'm ready to be in a relationship. I don't want to be single anymore." Like, please, why are you telling me this? Like, I already know this. And if that is the case, another thing that someone told me a little while ago was, what if your husband isn't ready for you? Like, what if he isn't ready for you and God's working on him? Would you want to meet your husband when he's not ready yet, for a relationship? Like, chances are no, because that would lead to pain for both of you. And so we say often, let go, let God, like all these little phrases, but do we really mean it? Because in these times of singleness, when we're like, okay, God, like I'm ready now, um, we're not trusting Him that He has the best time. And this definitely comes from spending more time with God. The more that I've built my relationship with Him, and learned more about him, the more I have been able to see things through his perspective. And the more I've been able to be like, wow, well, this breakup doesn't make sense right now, but I'm going to trust in your plan because I know that I cannot see what you're doing. And so clearly, you've never led me astray. And every other time I look back in my life when I went through a time that I'm like, what the heck? Why did this happen? I now look back in hindsight and I'm like, wow, I'm thankful that happened. So, every single time in my life that has happened. And so, why do I doubt that God can do the same with whatever situation we're in now? You know what I mean? And so, I definitely want to do another episode on dating and relationships. Whether you are, new to your faith and believing in God, or you've been a believer for a while, or you're just kind of like, what is this all about? Whatever place you're in, I hope that one thing that we can all agree on is that if you're not dating for marriage, you're dating for heartbreak. And I don't mean this by saying, when you go on the first date with that guy, you have to have in your mind, I'm going to marry him. I don't mean that. I just mean dating with intention, not just dating casually because, oh, that guy is really attractive, or, oh, he has a lot of money, or he has a great job, or he's the cool guy and everyone wants to date him. So I'm going to get to him first. You know what I mean? So dating with the intention of marriage ultimately. And not everyone is meant to get married. I think there's some people that don't have that desire. And God hasn't given them that desire, and that's great. But then some people, they have that desire, and that is a good thing because that is, how we were designed. So while there's people like in the Bible, like Paul wasn't married, there are also people in the Bible who were married and talk highly of it. And so I just wanted to share that to kind of close this up here. But with that being said, I really hope that this could provide some encouragement for you. Um, and I want to do another episode going more into this, so stay tuned for that. But I thank you so much for listening. And if you did like today's episode, make sure to subscribe, follow the podcast, subscribe on YouTube if you want to see other videos, because I also post some other videos that are unrelated to the podcast. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I hope that we can continue each day to create a life that we love.